Okay, so one of the hardest things that you will find to cut out in Photoshop to copy and paste something into a new document is to cut out hair. It's because there's so many fine lines. It's a tricky thing to cut hair out from an image. And this particular picture is a challenge more than others in that the background colour and the colour of the dog's hair are quite similar. So we've got a brown background and the colour of the dog's hair is bright brown too. So ideally, if you're working with a picture or taking a photograph and you know you're going to want to cut the subject out from the background, it's a good idea to try to take a photo with a more contrast, a greater contrast between the subject and the background. So if our dog has brown hair, this photograph would work better if the background was a blue and preferably very tonally different too. So where these tones are quite different, if we had a very dark background with a lighter coloured hair, we'd find it easier. But in the interests of seeing the challenge of working with a tool, I think it's a good idea to have a go at cutting out something that is a little bit more on the tricky side, just so you can see the pitfalls that you will come up against. Okay, so to start cutting this dog out, we're going to go to Select and then Colour Range. And this lets us create a selection based on a certain colour in our picture. And what we're going to do is click on this background, because the background is, apart from these zigzag lines, the background is essentially this brown colour here. So if I click now on this brown colour, that tells Photoshop that I want to select elements that match this background's colour. So here's our colour range dialog, and as I drag the fuzziness slider up and down, you can see a preview down here of what's actually going to be selected, and anything that's turning white at this point is going to become a selection, those little ants that we've mucked around with. So we want to try to get as much of the background turning white as possible and leaving the dog as black as possible. But as you can see, if I go too high with my fuzziness, too much of my dog is turning white, and if I go too dark, too low with my fuzziness, too much of the background is turning black. So it's always a trade-off, but we're going to go, I'm guessing, somewhere around 60 pixels, so that's getting most of the background and some of the dog, which we can fix up in a minute. So I'll press OK. You can see what's happened. It's created a selection of our background, but as we saw in the preview, it's creeped in and it's grabbing bits of our dog as well. What we can do at this point is simply grab our lasso tool and go into the subtract mode, which is the third button along the top here, to tell Photoshop we want to subtract from or take away from the selection that's already there. And then we can just start by cutting little bits out. So I'm just dragging click and dragging the mouse around these different elements inside the dog picture. So you can see already, had we taken this photograph of the dog against a more contrasted background, we wouldn't have as much of this sort of post-process work to do. We won't worry about the zigzag lines that are still not selected, that haven't been grabbed. We'll fix that in a minute, but what we definitely want to do at the moment is make sure that we have as much of this dog as possible. So I'm just sort of moving around. You may want to zoom right in at this point. Depends how long you've got to work on the picture. If you're working to a tight deadline, you probably don't want to spend too long. But if you've got a bit of time, the more time you spend at this point, the better the result's going to be. So we'll leave it at something like that, I think, for now. And then what we need to do, because we've got the background selected, we actually want the dog selected, so be able to copy and paste our dog. So we can flip this selection in on itself. Just to demonstrate that before I do, if I do a copy and paste right now, so I'm going to go edit copy and then go and paste that into a new picture. You can see the problem is that we've grabbed the background behind the dog, but we want the dog. So we need to go select and then inverse, and that inverses the selection on itself. So now instead of the background selected, we've got the dog. And we'll go edit copy and that copies the dog into memory. And if we just go ahead and go File, New, create a new document, by default the preset size of a new document will be whatever's in our clipboard, whatever we've copied. So because we just copied that dog, when I go to create a new document, you can see that the preset size of our new document is set to be the same size as the dog that we've copied. So I can just press OK, gives us a new document, and then we can go Edit, Paste. So there's our dog sitting there. You can see a particular problem here. I won't go back and fix it now, but we can spend a bit of time, or ideally you'd want to spend a bit of time cleaning up this top edge. But that's the dog now. You can see when we paste, it automatically creates a new layer to paste it in. There's our dog on a new background. And then we can create a layer mask. Layer mask, reveal all, remember this, and then grab a black brush, quite a large black brush, so we'll set it to something like 60 pixels, once again hardness on 0, and then I'll just start masking out these bits of the layer that we brought through that we didn't want. And once again, the more time you spend carefully moving around the picture at this point, the better the end result is going to be. So you want to zoom in and sort of carefully get some of these other little bits and pieces. Had we had a picture with a more contrasted background, obviously there's less of this stuff to fix, but you can see what we need to do now. And we could muck around with other tools to clean it up a bit further, but for now, because it's just beginner videos for now, we'll sort of leave it at that. We might go ahead and grab another picture to sit this dog on. So we'll get that cat picture open again. And to sit this behind the dog picture, we'll go Select All, to select the whole page, the whole cat. Edit Copy, copies the entire document because we've selected it all. And then back in our dog picture, we'll paste it. There's our cat picture pasted in. You can see now in my layers, layer 1 contains the dog with the mask, layer 2 contains the cat. We'll do a free transform. Once again, what we've covered before, edit, free transform, just to pull this to the sides. Tick it when you're done, press enter. And then if I drag layer 2 now below layer 1, and let it go, you can see there's our dog now sitting with a new background. One last thing is you'll notice that there's a bit of what I call a halo effect. It's almost like the edges of these lines are a little bit too bright and a little bit too sort of pixelated. It becomes a bit too obvious, the edges of the dog's hairs. Another way we can just add a little bit more realism so that the hairs of the dog blend in with the background is to select the dog layer on the image, not the mask, but the image, and then use the burn tool, which you'll find down here, about halfway down. You click and hold the mouse button down, it looks like this little hand sort of thing. And the burn tool is used to darken elements of your picture. So once again, hardness on 0, so we're using a soft edged brush, fairly large. I've got that on about 100. And you can see as I paint around these edges of the dog's hair, they just darken off a bit, and it just gets rid of that, let's say, what I call the halo effect, where it's just that little bit too bright to be believable. And sometimes the opposite is the case. Sometimes you want to actually lighten the edges of those hairs. But you can see something like that, where it's sort of getting a nicer blend.